The fog came in over the Atlantic like a living thing, thick and cold, swallowing the bow of our ship, the San Esteban. Modern radar showed nothing, yet the crew whispered among themselves, nerves stretched taut, because we all knew a ship wasn't supposed to be there. Not for another 200 years, at least. It glided out of the mist with the slow, terrifying inevitability of a phantom. Its timbers creaked as if they were alive. Its sails were tattered beyond belief, yet somehow they billowed against the wind. And on its deck, we saw something more horrifying than the sea itself. Men, or what had once been men. Their flesh was gone, leaving only bone, yet their movements were fluid, like shadows wearing the memory of human muscle. Their hollow sockets fixed on us, jaws moving in silent, chilling words. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. It shouldn't exist, I muttered, my voice barely a whisper. My crew shook their heads in disbelief, but no one argued. None of us could explain the legends I had dismissed as mere superstition until this very moment. It had all started 2 weeks earlier. My team and I were following an obscure Spanish map we'd found in a private archive in Seville. It was marked with coordinates that didn't exist on any modern chart, but beneath the centuries-old ink and water stains, there were notes, written in the familiar spidery hand of 16th century sailors. The word sent a shiver down my spine. The fleet shall return when the world forgets. Seek the marked isle. The crew waits it, intrigued and admittedly skeptical. I had gathered a team of historians and divers. We were chasing myths, whispers of a Spanish armada that vanished without a trace back in 1588. Ships, men, treasures all gone. History books said it sank in storms, but sailors' tailies murmured of darker fates. A curse that trapped the entire fleet outside time itself. The first real clue appeared on a satellite image, a faint, ghostly outline of a ship, right in the middle of the North Atlantic. At first, my team assumed it was a glitch, a digital ghost, but when our sonar confirmed the outline, there was no denying it. "This is impossible," muttered Dr. Marco Villanueva, our team's historian. "Ships don't just reappear after centuries. They rot, sink, vanish. That's how physics works." But physics seemed to have abandoned this patch of ocean. By our third night at sea, the fog thickened unnaturally. Strange lights flickered across the water, and then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a shadow emerged from the mist. We all froze as the San Esteban drew closer. The Armada was massive, an entire fleet of spectral ships, yet utterly silent. Its sails hung like blackened bones in the wind. On deck, skeletal figures moved with an unnatural grace. Some adjusted phantom ropes, others scrubbed the deck, as if rehearsing a ritual they'd been performing for eternity. One of them paused, turning its skeletal head toward our ship. Its eye sockets seemed to gleam faintly in the twilight. It was alive, and it was aware of us. I reached for my radio, but only static screamed back. All our instruments went haywire. Compass needles spun wildly. Nothing modern functioned near the Armada. This isn't real," whispered Villanueva, his academic certainty shattered. But then, the skeletal crew began to wave, almost casually, as if inviting us closer. Or maybe they were warning us away. I couldn't tell which. My team debated turning back, but curiosity, that powerful, dangerous human trait, outweighed our fear. We launched a small boat, our oars cutting through the thick fog, pulling us toward the phantom ship. The closer we got, the more we noticed details that just didn't make sense. The rigging was frayed, but it seemed completely untouched by time. The deck boards were warped, but unweathered by salt or sea. Spread across the captain's table were maps, showing places that didn't exist, islands with names that defied translation, mountains rising from spots where there should be nothing but open ocean. One of my crew, Javier, leaned over the side of our boat, his eyes wide. "These maps, they're like blueprints of something impossible." Then, the whispering began. It started faintly, like wind whistling through a broken mast, but soon it became voices 16th century Spanish, repeating names, dates, events. A cold dread washed over us as we realized with a growing, sinking horror Some of the events they whispered about were future events, ones we knew had already happened. Wars, storms, global tragedies. It was as if the Armada didn't just witness history. It knew it? Or maybe it wrote it. A skeletal sailor leaned over the railing, its bony finger pointing directly at me. I froze. Its jaw moved soundlessly, but in my mind, I heard a clear, cold voice. "You're next!" Javier screamed. He stumbled back in our small boat, knocking an oar into the water. When he looked up again, the skeletons were closer, crowding the deck of their ship, their empty sockets trained on us. I knew instinctively they weren't dead in any conventional sense. They were trapped, cursed, existing outside the flow of time, doomed to repeat their last voyage endlessly. And now, I feared we were being counted among them. Villanueva, our historian, grabbed the impossible maps from the ghost ship's table, his fingers trembling as he traced a path. One location stood Autan Island that shouldn't exist. The coordinates led into what our chart showed as empty ocean, yet as our small boat approached, our handheld sonar began to detect a landmass beneath the waves. "It's there," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's been hidden. Or maybe it's been moving." Behind us, the Armada began to follow. Sail, creaking timbers groaning. The entire fleet moved as one. The skeletons moved in perfect, unnerving synchronization. Each step, each motion, was disturbingly human. I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on us, the terrifying knowledge that history itself was bending around these cursed sailors. The island rose from the mist like a jagged tooth. The maps indicated a cave, deep and twisting. We rowed ashore, our lanterns barely piercing the oppressive darkness. The cave walls were etched with names, dates, and strange symbols. And there, at the very center, a skeletal figure dressed as a captain knelt over a dark pool of water. Its jaw moved. This time, the words were audible, echoing in the damp air. "We guard the doorway, until forgotten. You should not be here." A freezing wind swept through the cave, extinguishing our lanterns in an instant. Whispers filled every corner, coming from everywhere at once. My team panicked. People were disoriented, bumping into each other in the pitch black. Some ran. Some froze in terror. I stood paralyzed, staring at where the captain had been, and then I realized the names etched into the walls weren't just those of the Armada. They were my crew's names, right alongside dates of disappearance that hadn't happened yet. Night fell outside the cave. The fog grew even thicker, a suffocating blanket. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I spun around, no one was there. The whispering continued. A constant, maddening murmur. The skeletal crew had surrounded us, not attacking, but just watching. It was as if the Armada existed to mark the living, to remind us that time was not our ally. Villanueva, trembling, finally put it into words. "We're part of the story now," he choked out. "The maps. The crew. We've crossed into their timeline. We can't leave. We can't." A scream cut him off. Javier. He just vanished. Gone. There was no struggle, no sound, no trace. Only a ripple in the fog and the faint echo of his last word. Real. I tried to flee. I stumbled through the cave, the whispering growing louder. The faces of the skeletal crew swam in the shadows, their empty eyes following my every move. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the cave fell silent. Outside, the Armada was gone. The ocean was calm. The island, unmarked on any chart, was just an island again. The maps had changed. The coordinates of the hidden isle were gone. Only one thing remained. A small, wet imprint on the sand. A skeletal handprint. Back aboard the San Esteban, the few of us who remained stared at the empty horizon. Our satellites, sonar, and radio were all functional again. We were alive, but everything had changed. The maps we'd recovered now contained a new location, drawn in what looked like fresh ink, a set of coordinates, somewhere out in the Atlantic, and a note in that same, spidery handwriting. Next voyage, began. I swallowed hard, the salty air catching in my throat. I didn't have to speak, we all felt Italiano. The ocean seemed to hum with a new, ancient energy, waiting. And in the mist on the far horizon, I thought I saw a shadow. The Armada's shadow, gliding closer, patient, eternal. The world around us was calm, but I knew the curse was far from over. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more stories from the edge of the map, make sure to subscribe.